Broadcasting from Baltimore, Maryland, this is 5x3 Radio, where strength is for everyone. I'm your host, Emily Sokolinski, owner of 5x3 Training, a strength and conditioning gym in Baltimore, along with my co-host, Rebecca Fishburne, founder of Cornerstone Strength Maryland. Each week, Rebecca and I will discuss the ins and outs of strength training, why there is a no one-size-fits-all approach, and why strength is so important in our daily lives. Thanks for spending some time with us today. Now, on with the show. Hi, everybody, and we are back, 5x3 Radio. Rebecca and I are here today to talk about the deadlift. We're moving on to part 3. Lift. The best lift, according to Rebecca, because you do it so well. You've got a good deadlift.
Yeah, it's always my favorite. I don't know.
Always. I was going down memory lane on Instagram the other day, looking at pictures from the old place. And you kept popping up here and there. Like, Rebecca pulling 290. Rebecca pulling this, Rebecca pulling that. Yeah. So we're on to part 3 of our 4-part series on the big lifts. We have covered the squat and we covered the bench. And so we thought today, part 3 would be on the deadlift. So again, we've just been going over helpful cues for each of the lifts. Some things, something that maybe you've learned, you've thought about, or hasn't made sense to you, but maybe it'll make sense today once we discuss it. But a few things that Rebecca and I like to use for ourselves when we train, and of course coach our clients, and some cues that that we use that might be helpful to you. So I think with all the lifts, we want to start with the setup, right? That's ideally the best way to approach the lift. So the setup. I, of course, use the 5-step setup. Do you do the same with your clients? Yeah.
And I mean, I think I would guess a lot of people listening to this would be familiar with that. But if not, just, briefly going over it. The first step is getting your stance. The second step is getting your grip with straight legs. The third step is bringing your shins to the bar. Fourth step, set your back. Back in extension, and then the 5th step, drag the bar up your legs.
Yeah, so pretty simple, the 5-step setup, and there are multiple videos that show the 5-step setup. I like Barbell Logic's video that CJ Gocher has got a pretty good video. I think it's also Barbell Logic. There are a couple different ones, but CJ's got a quick, to the point, 1-minute long video of.
I like Alan Thrall videos. They're not quick to the point.
They're not. They're entertaining. So as Rebecca was saying, so the setup, so taking your stance. So your stance, I always tell people, come about an inch and a half away from the bar. Now that's going to be vary. That might depend and vary from lifter to lifter, right? Some of my bigger clients may have to stand maybe 2 inches away from the bar, right? Bigger, I mean, overweight, and they might not be able to get that close to the bar to start. They might have to take a different stance, maybe a wider stance and a little further away, just in order for them to get into a quote unquote as comfortable position as possible, because it's not a comfortable position down there, right? We don't want people to be, having a tea party. Mm-hmm. So we have to kind of be mindful of, moving away from the model as needed. But ideally, it's about an inch and a half away, correct? That was usually what you use.
The other thing you mentioned was with like a wider client taking a larger client taking a slightly wider stance, right? Just for comparative purposes, or like what would not be a wider stance. Like generally the stance width is going to be your, like a jump stance. Like if you were going to do a high jump, how far away would your feet be, right? Like you're not going to take a sumo stance. You're not going to be super wide. You're going to be, sort of optimally positioned to go up.
Yeah, fairly narrow. Yeah. A lot of people I like to sometimes help people find their stance from the knurling in the bar, right? So usually there's a center knurling, and then there's the smooth part of the bar. So typically you might just say, okay, line yourself up in the middle of the smooth part. So they look at the knurling and then they kind of adjust their legs from there. So that's kind of a nice way to, for someone visually to see it.
Because I actually had a conversation with someone this past week that I was working with who is not a barbell person. And it's funny to me always, like the things that need to be spoken that you think ought to be just generally understood, like somebody completely setting themselves up, like over to one side of the bar as opposed to in the center of the bar. So, evenly positioned in that smooth center part of the bar.
Right.
Well, sometimes people to be stated.
It does. Yes, it does. And I think it's like, people tend to move around. I try to get people to not move too much once they get in position, right? Like adjust their feet, keep moving out, moving in. I try to find their stance and if you can keep it there. Sometimes movement might happen, but ideally you just want to, take that stance. And once you're actually set up, let it, leave it alone. And if that means you're off a little bit, you'll know, because then you'll have to just, because the bar is going to feel really weird when it comes off the floor. So about an inch and a half away from the bar, usually I'll say kind of do like a little bird's eye view, check out, where the bar is in relationship to your shoes if you're wearing shoes. So usually it's right over your shoelaces, right? Yeah. If people are barefoot or in slippers, you might have to give them a little bit more cueing, like think about where your shoes, where the shoelaces are. And once people start to find that same setup each time, it's pretty easy for them to get into it. Just like with everything, just like with the bench, maybe we didn't talk too much about the bench, but with the squat, trying to replicate that setup over and over and over again. Don't try to change it up each time. Maybe you're doing that in the beginning to figure out what works best for you. But once you find that stance and that setup, stick with it, right? It just try to replicate that every single time. So narrow stance, bar over the shoelaces, about an inch and a half away from the bar. Hands, where do you place their hands?
Like toes, slightly pointed
toes, out. Thank you. Yes.
Yeah, toes turned out. And not anywhere near as much as with your squat, maybe just about 5 degrees out. And right. The purpose for that really always is like knees lined up with toes is a good place to be. And if your knees are straight forward, they're going to be in the way of the bar. So knees pushed out a little bit, keeps them out of the way of the bar, and also allows you to recruit more adductor on the way up, I think.
Yeah. And also if you are a slightly bigger person, it allows you to just get that belly between those legs, so it kind of makes room for you, right? Makes room for yourself. So a lot of reasons to why you want to have the knees out. Also, for some women, some of my clients, and I say women because it usually is specifically my ladies, their knees tend to have that, we have knee valgus, and if they have knee valgus in the squat, I typically always see it in the deadlift too. So having them turn their toes out helps remind them where their knees have to track, and then you have the contact with the knees and the arms. And I try to really instill in them, try to think about pushing your knees out just the way you do when you squat. You have to kind of ingrain that in them, and then feel the arms, against the knees and against the legs as you start to pull the bar off the floor.
Yeah, you're on step 4 already now.
I know. I always jump ahead. But that's another reason why having the toes turned out, because if they're not, the minute they start to push, the knees just, they fly right in. Like it's just automatic. So that's something for anybody who's maybe just finding that they have some of that knee valgus, or maybe they have a coach who's listening who has a client. Really emphasize, having those toes out and those knees out. So stance, we've got grip. When you take the bar in your hands, where do you usually have them grab the bar? Because we have a little, a little bit of a helpful cue for them to, when they take the grip.
I mean, like if it's a longer, taller, wider person, it's going to be a little bit wider, but generally just around the edge of the knurl, maybe a finger width or something like that. I'm right
out. Yeah, exactly. I don't like to have them, when people take the grip, I try to tell them to have a little bit of that knurling showing. So you've got the smooth part of the bar to the knurling. So you're not just covering up all the knurling. You only have a little bit wider than that. That's going to help get that chest through. And of course, if you have a little wider stance, so if you're a little bigger person, you might even take a little wider grip than that, just to make sure that you're in a position where you can really open up the chest and engage the back.
I think too, like when you're getting started and you're learning the lift and the weight is heavy, you can sort of think about the grip a little bit when you're at the top, when it's locked out. Like your arms are kind of just be hanging down by your sides, your thumbs on the outside of your thighs or the seam of your pants, or that sort of thing. They're not wide, they're not like in front of you on your thigh. So you can kind of double check or think about, well, is my grip wide enough or not quite as wide, based on where your fist is in relation to your thigh when you get to that locked out position.
Yeah, and you have to be mindful that if you end up taking a wider stance at the bottom, and when you should be taking a narrow stance, the wider your legs, the wider your arms, right? Because you're gonna set your arms, hands up outside the knees, and if the knees are, if you've got a fairly wide stance, then your hands are going to be wider, and that makes it a lot harder. That's why snatch grip RDLs are tougher than regular RDLs because you've got that wide stance. I mean, that wide grip's a lot more stress on the traps. So, be mindful of that. It's always good to obviously have a coach helping you. If you don't have a coach, there are plenty of good videos out there to show you. Always good to watch somebody who looks like you.
Yeah, proportionally.
Right? Proportionally, always good to watch somebody who looks like you. Don't, if you're a 5'11", 6, or if you're like 6'4", don't watch someone who's 4'10" getting set up for a deadlift. It's a bad idea. So you grab the bar just outside the knees, typically a little bit of knurling showing.
Oh, and then I don't remember if we talked about this before when we talked about it. I guess we did a whole grip episode though, but
we did.
Typically with deadlift, I'll have somebody start out with double overhand. When it starts to get heavy, and I encourage like a hook grip. If somebody's got long enough thumbs and can tolerate that, and then sort of save the flip grip for later. So you sort of maintain that symmetrical force on the shoulder girdle for as long as possible. And then depending on a person's goals, if they're not thinking of competing or something like that, maybe encouraging straps sooner rather than later if they're not going to be competing.
See, now you're jumping ahead.
Yeah, maybe. That's still step 2, grip.
Yes. No. Yeah. Exactly. No. I know. Yeah. So grip, and actually, there was a good article. Finally, a good article that came out on the website. On limitations. Don't artificially limit your lifts. And it was a good article because it talked about just what we talked about when we talked about gear. Wear knee sleeves if you need them. Get straps if you need them.
Yeah.
Mix your grip, hook grip if you need it. I mean, don't try to limit yourself because, I want my abs stronger, so I'm not going to put a belt on until my abs are stronger, until my core is stronger. Oh, yeah, my grip, I'm just going to, mixed grip, hook grip, those are for wusses. I'm going to keep it. No, it's not a grip exercise. The deadlift is not a grip exercise. As Rebecca was saying, eventually the grip's going to give out, but your legs are not. Your legs are strong enough. Your back is still strong enough. Your hands is the weak link. So you have to eventually either chalk first, right? Because some people don't even use chalk. So if chalk will help them stay with a double overhand position without having to move to a hook grip just yet, great. Eventually, you have enough chalk on your hands. It's still not enough. Now you have to decide, okay, what grip is going to be the best for me? Ideally, same with me. I like the hook grip because it stays with that double overhand position, and the mixed grip just kind of sometimes causes more problems than before for people. But I do like teaching both. It's important to know both and know which one works best for you. You were going to say something?
No, I was just thinking about people I've worked with that where you get to the top and they don't quite lock out their deadlift and it's because their grip is slipping, and then they get frustrated, like, oh, why can't I do this? And I'm like, use some straps. And they're like, oh no, I don't want
your hand.
I had somebody, I don't want to use straps. And there was again, like, unfortunately timed article about it's not a grip exercise, which the individual read and was like, oh, it's just what you were just saying. So I guess I'll go ahead and use the straps.
I know, it was a really good timed article. I was like, oh, that's awesome. Because it was exactly the gear episode, right? It was our gear episode. Like, this is a reason that they have gear. You want to get stronger. Use these various, pieces of equipment that will help you get stronger. You're not going to somehow, miraculously add 150 pounds to your bench because you decide to wear arm sleeves, elbow sleeves, or wrist wraps. You're just going to, be able to hold that bar a little better because things aren't going to bother you as much. So, but that's the other. If you haven't heard that episode yet, go and find our gear episode, and you can go to the Starting Strength website to find the link to the article on artificially limiting your lifts. Don't do it. So we've got stance, we've got grip.
Yep.
Then we talked about coming to the bar.
Yeah.
So coming to the bar. So what do you usually tell people, like remind people to do when they bend their knees after they've, because usually you want to take your grip with straight-ish legs. Straight-ish legs, because some people
or
can't
as straight
do
as
it.
possible.
Yeah. And why? Why do we want to do that? What's the point in doing that as opposed to bending down, squatting down to the bar? So
Just because that establishes your hip position. Then if you're squatting down to the bar, your hips are going to be really low. You're going to essentially be in more of like a trap bar position, as opposed to, a conventional deadlift. So straightish legs, don't move the bar, right? The whole point of step one when you're setting up the stance is to get the bar positioned over the middle of the foot, so you're in your center of balance, that kind of thing. And moving your shins to the bar allows the bar to stay in that position, get your hips in the correct position, and just get the whole thing all kind of tied together there.
Exactly. Because if you squat down the bar, what I often see when people do that, they grab the bar, and as they grab the bar, and as they're grabbing the bar or reaching for it, they're bending their knees at the same time, right? So that's why I say they're squatting the bar. Well, the bar moves. The bar rolls away from them. Now their knees are protruding over the bar, and their hips, as you said, are low. They're kind of in that trap bar position, which is a good deadlift. A trap bar deadlift is a fine deadlift. It's just going to be a lot more quads, right? It's a little bit more squatty.
Yeah.
Than your deadlift, and we're trying to work on the hamstrings and the glutes here, right? We're trying to work on that. So you want to hinge. You want to think about shoving your butt to the back wall as you reach down for the bar. So if you can't reach down with straight legs, you don't have that flexibility. It's soft knees and just more thinking about the hips extending, right? The hips moving.
Hips to the back
shooting
wall,
back. Hips to the back wall.
Yeah,
hips to the back wall. Reach down. Then once you've got the grip, once you've got the bar in your hands, bend the knees. The shins will automatically touch the bar, right? They'll be about 2 seconds later, their shins are on the bar. Don't move the bar. Don't move the bar, right?
Don't move your feet.
Don't move your feet. Don't move the bar. And if someone starts to move the bar, I'll have them stand up and start all over again, right? So you're establishing your position with, you've already started it with the stance. That's why if you stand too far away from the bar, you're going to be reaching for that bar when you bend, right? When you start to bend your legs. And now you're in a really strange position, which probably more so, you're more in your heels. If the bar is too close to you, then the minute you start to bend, all of a sudden the shins are like on the bar, like within like a split second. Then you kind of have an idea that you might be too close to the bar. So,
I mean, all of that, though, I think you can tell better once you get your chest squeezed through.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Well, sometimes actually, no. I feel like if the bar starts to roll away from you, you know that you're too close.
Yeah.
You started too
close.
And some
people though, they won't even actually realize that they're doing it. You tell them to bring their shins to the bar, and they end up bringing the bar to their shins, which is not shins to the bar to the shins.
Right.
That was not what I said to do.
Exactly. Yeah, you like how people roll the bar to them. I always stop them. I'm like, nope, don't bring the bar to you. You bring yourself to the bar.
Yeah.
It's just it's easier to I think to think of that way, that you are the one moving around the bar.
Well, yeah, and I guess like if you watch like a lot of the videos of people like strongmen or whatever doing really heavy deadlifts, that's pretty much how they do it. They're rolling the bar to them, and so maybe people have this idea in their head that that's what they're supposed to do if they've watched any of those videos. So it's a little bit different instructional procedure, but it's for that purpose of getting your hips set up in that position instead of finding that position while you're already moving.
We talk a lot about that at our camps.
Yeah.
So because people see a lot of strong people, men and women, rolling that bar to them. What are all those people pretty much have in common, though? The ones who are rolling that bar to them, they're big. They're huge. You've got all the strong men. They're like 400 some pounds. They're 6'5", 6'4", walking around at 400 pounds. Okay. They're on a whole other level than you and me. So a lot of people,
but also they're going to have a lot of deadlifting history behind them.
They have that.
So like they're going to know they're going to know the feel of the right plate.
Yeah. So they have that history. So if one, they have that history, they're way more advanced. Two, they're big, and they can't do the whole get to the bar, grab the bar, bring my shins to the bar, squeeze my chest up, futz around. They're big. They got big bellies. They got a lot of shit there. They can't be comfortable.
Well,
right?
yeah, everything's all compressed.
Everything's all compressed. So, so that's not going to do well. I mean, we had a gentleman actually at our camp who, big guy, big belly, he would roll the bar. He was like busting out, like, his eyeballs were coming out of his head. Conditioning wise, he probably could have used a little bit more conditioning too, but he had a great way of rolling the bar and being able to time it so that when the bar rolled into him, he could pick it up. His lats didn't have to do a lot of work either, right? There's a nice little timing going on. But that's not something that we teach. We don't want to teach that. Again, those are people, the advanced lifters you see who are doing that, they have the history, they know what works for them. And then you've got some lifters who they do find that works well for them too, if they can time it correctly, because it's really uncomfortable at the bottom of the deadlift. You can make as much room for yourself as you want, but if you've got a big belly, you're not going to be that comfortable down there. So those strong guys, those strong men and strong women, they do, they can kind of play a little bit differently with the setup. But when that bar comes off the floor, they all look the same. Mm-hmm. They all look like you and me. It's just just how they're getting set up. So once you bring your shins to the bar, you squeeze your chest up.
Yeah. So there we go again with the Superman chest. You're making your Superman chest. It's like I know one of the cues that you guys use a lot is like if you've got words on your t-shirt, your data feelings one right now.
Exactly.
You're going to squeeze that through so that somebody looking at you from the front would be able to read the words on your shirt. Or sometimes, like going along the same lines as the Superman chest, ice cube in the back. Sometimes I'll poke a person in the back, right between the shoulder blades where they're supposed to.
With your fingernail?
Yeah, with my finger. Not my nail.
You have a fingernail. No, I poke with a fingernail.
Yeah, but just kind of poke there, and you just naturally or instinctively squeeze away from somebody poking you in the middle of the back. Whatever, tight armpit, chest squeeze through, Superman chest.
Yep.
Wrinkles on the back of the shirt. Same thing.
All of that.
With Ben.
Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. The wrinkles on the shirt. Once the person understands all the lifts, I'll say to them, that shirt should be tight in the front for every single lift. All the wrinkles should always be in the back, right? Pressing, benching, deadlifting, squatting, doesn't matter what lift it is. You never should see the wrinkles in the front of your shirt. That means you're not tight, right? That means you've lost your chest. So that tight armpits, tight back, lats on, all of that, I cue that a tons too, like keep your chest up, squeeze your back. But where does it come from? I truly believe, as I'm helping people understand how to create that tension in the body with the deadlift, comes from taking that slack out of the bar. Yeah. If you learn to take that slack out, and I say taking the click out of the bar, right? You can hear that little click when you pull the bar in, keep that. Automatically you're tight. I said, if you can learn to just pull that slack out, pull that bar into your hands, your lats automatically engage, your armpits are already tight. You don't have to think about it anymore. Feel the bar in your hands. You've got 135 pounds on the bar. You pull the slack out, you now have 130 pounds in your hands. The rest is just using the legs to push everything away. So once people start to understand and hear that click and feel that bar in their hands and kind of get a different idea of like, what am I doing when I get tight? Then it just starts to, work itself out. Yeah. That tightness.
Yeah, that heavy in the hands cue works really well for a lot of people. Yeah. Or sometimes even if somebody doesn't really understand that initially, or the gym is loud and they can't hear the click.
Yes.
Or, some plates click better than other
bumpers don't click as well as iron.
Sometimes I'll have a person when they're learning kind of hover the bar off the ground. So the plates just come off the ground and feel what that feels like. So just as they're breaking off the ground or an inch off the ground, that's kind of, the equivalent of having somebody, do a really slow tempo squat initially just to learn the movement, that kind of thing. But I like having people hover it too, just for a learning exercise.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, I'll demonstrate once they kind of, we don't ever demonstrate the lifts, right? I mean, occasionally I might grab a bar and demonstrate a press, but that's after we've kind of walked them through the process, gotten them into the position. Then maybe I'll demonstrate. With the click, I will come up and grab the bar with them, right? They'll have the bar, I'll have the bar, and I'll pull it. I'll say, do you see what happens? Can you hear it? Can you see me? Can you feel what happens when you do that? I said, do you see when I grab the bar and take the slack out that the bar is hovering off, the plates are hovering off the floor, and I haven't done anything except gotten tight? They're like, yeah. I'm like, that's what I'm talking about.
I've seen Diego demonstrate that also, like the getting tight in the step 4, right?
Yeah.
I'm talking about, like you were saying, like, oh, if the bar is 135, you've got 130 pounds before you start. And like he will get literally red-faced. I don't know what I look like when I demonstrate that, but I've watched him do it and he gets like beet red. And the point being is that when you are tight and when you are set up properly for a deadlift, work is already happening. Like you're already it's already hard work.
And that is over the years, as Diego has demonstrated, like, to people getting tight in the deadlift, they see him kind of, take a couple times to, like, kind of shoulders back. And they think they don't realize what he's actually doing, where he's just trying to, that's his own setup. That's the way he sets up. But the minute he gets tight, the slack is out of the bar. He's pulled the slack out. They may not see that. So they start to crank the bar like they're
revving the engine.
Revving a motorcycle. And I'll tell them, you're not a motorcycle. It's not a motorcycle. The bar is not a motorcycle. We're not doing this with the shoulders, right? It's not the arms bending. There's none of that. It's this. It's just the bar in the hands. And they go, oh. Because I'll demonstrate their way. I'm like, look, I'm getting tight. And I go to get tight, but their slack's not out. There's no tension. I don't have the bar in my hand. And that bar is dead weight. Right? I mean, it's a deadlift, right? It's dead weight off the floor. No wonder it feels heavier. Then the minute the slack comes out, there's tension in the bar. There's tension. The bar flies off the floor. It's like stapled 1 second and then coming off like it's 65 pounds the next, simply because of what you've done in regards to the bar, your hands, and your back, right? But that takes for some people really figuring out, like, what do I actually mean by bar in the hands, heavy in the hands?
Well, and you just said something too about no bend in the arm. And that's the thing that you see. I see fairly often with people who have not deadlifted before, where they have in their mind something that's maybe a little bit more like a shrug, or like if they try and even demonstrate, like, oh, a deadlift, like, an air deadlift, there's like an arm bend and something ridiculous looking. But the whole idea of, like, elbows should be locked out, right? The bar should be heavy in your hands. There should be no bend in the elbow. The shoulders are squeezed back. The other thing I see a lot of times too, we're at the end, I'm at the end of step 5 now, but like in terms of setting that up, right? Like if a person has got their chest squeezed through, right? Then it should stay there. Right. So it should stay there. And then I see this a lot with people who have like done group fitness classes like group power or power pump or whatever, because in those classes often you'll get a cue at the top of a movement that mimics a deadlift, where they roll their shoulders back.
I know,
right? That rolled shoulder back position is where they should already be. And if you can do that at the top of your deadlift, then you know for sure 100% you did not get your back set properly on step 4, right? So if you get to the top and you're up, back, and down with your shoulders, like gets cued in those classes, then you haven't set up step 4 properly.
No one can see me, but I'm shaking my head very vigorously.
Emily almost looks like she's going to cry.
I am
You've
like a
given those cues too.
I'm like a bobblehead. I'm a bobblehead. I just gave that cue yesterday. I give it all the time. And it's very, and again, it's like the person's strong enough to get the bar off the floor. When the bar is light enough, that bar will come off the floor.
With terrible form.
Any way it wants.
Anywhere.
It wants.
All kinds of slack.
I know, because I have video of me deadlifting with the bar 5 inches off my shins, right? So I know that it's doable, but once it's heavy enough, that bar is not going anywhere.
Yeah.
It's not going to go anywhere. And then the person's like, why isn't the bar moving? Why is my back rounding? So that roll, God, those Les Mills classes, they teach that bullshit of shoulders rolling back. And I had a girlfriend I was teaching this to, and that was one thing that she constantly did. She's like, well, we do it in the, what's that Les Mills class called?
Body pump.
Body pump, thank you. Oh, God, I took it one time and it hurt my shoulder so much I never went back. Yeah, that roll. I'm like, yeah, because the bar weighs 5 pounds in that class. You can do anything you want in that class. So yeah, that roll that Rebecca was talking about is simply exactly that. There's no tension from the bottom. So the bar is coming off the legs, and the brain's like, I don't feel tight. You need to move it. This bar is not going to finish. So the instinct is to shoulders shrug up and drop back. And every time I see that, I know exactly what has happened, because I can see it from the bar comes off the floor. I'm not seeing the wrinkles in the shirt. I'm seeing the hips kind of fly up before the rest of it. I know what's going to happen at the top before it even happens. The minute it doesn't, when that click happens in their brain and in their and they can hear it, it's almost like it's a whole different lift. It's a whole different lift. And again, they always say, that was a lot easier. That felt so much easier. I was like, I know. It's amazing. And they're like, we kind of know what you're doing. I said, I think I kind of do know what I'm doing sometimes. But yeah, that's a very difficult thing and I may not spend that much time, definitely not that much time on the first day of deadlifting, but second, third day, I'm going to say, hey, okay, we're going to talk about something now, taking the slack out of the bar. Yeah. Or if they work with another coach, the coach talk about like taking the slack out, and they might say, yeah, or I didn't understand it, or no, I'm not. Like, okay, good. This is the time now to talk about that, because the weight's at a point where let's discuss what that means. And then we go through it, and I might, demonstrate it, and have them demonstrate it with me, and have their hand on the bar with my hands on the bar, and we pull it together, right? And it might take a little bit, but then once that clicks with someone, it usually stays with them, and then they always have to hear it. Or if they don't, I hear it, or I don't hear the click, and I can see it too from rep to rep, and I'll say, take the slack out. You see the person do it, and they go, yeah, I didn't do it on the second rep. I'm like, I know. And they're like, and the third rep felt easier. I know. So it's very satisfying. But it's satisfying for you too, to be like, okay, they get it now, and now I'm going to see some really nice deadlifts, as a result. So, all right, so we've got taking the slack out, getting tight. So what happens then when they start to the pull starts to happen?
Yeah, so that's funny, because you just said push and pull, right? So it's like deadlift is considered a pulling exercise. But once you get all the slack out, you've pulled all the slack out. Essentially, what it seems as though a body is doing is pushing the floor away. Obviously, the floor isn't being pushed away, but like, it's just a nice image to imagine that you are pushing the earth away from yourself. And I know, Diego always kind of compares that to the leg press machine, right? So like that same kind of pushing away of that foot platform.
Yeah. Have you ever laid down on the floor and demonstrated that?
The leg press?
I have.
Emily, why would you do that? You've got a leg press in the gym. Why would you not just point?
It's too far away. Well, before we had that, I'll lie down, I'll drop on the floor, and I'll put my legs up, and I'll like do that. I'll like push my legs away, and like that. And they're like looking at me like, why is my coach on the floor?
Yeah, I would too, Emily.
Well, because then I can demonstrate it. I'm not going to go over to the leg press. Like, I might point
that's
to leg
hilarious,
press.
though, because you're like, no, I don't demonstrate the lifts, but you're going to demonstrate that.
Well, when I say, pressing the floor away, I'll do it, and then I'll lie down real fast, and I'll like do it. Yeah, so pushing the floor away, pushing your heels into the floor, because like you said, the pull has already happened. You've already got the bar in your hands. Everything's tight. So now what has to happen? How does the bar come up the legs? Well, I tell people, you stand up. The reason the bar comes off the floor is because you're holding on to it, and you decide to stand up. And so, of course, the bar has to come up because, you're holding on to it. And it kind of makes it easier for them to kind of think less about like pulling it or it's like, oh yeah, you're right. I just stand up. Like, yeah, you stand up, and the bar kind of somehow comes with you because, you're holding on to it. If you let go, it won't come up. Called gravity. So there's a drag up the legs. Yeah. That's a tricky thing too, like the drag. We don't want you to drag it so much that you start to bleed all over the bar, right?
Although if you're in a meet, you do have to wear the long socks.
You have to wear the long socks because that can happen. Yeah. I mean, the bar is kind of gnarly. Yeah. Really gnarly bar, and it can destroy your shin. So, but we want it on your legs. We want it on your legs. You want there's contact with the bar, on the legs. So you're pushing through the floor. Ideally, your hips and shoulders are rising at the same time.
Yeah.
Right? You're not doing a stripper deadlift where the butt comes up first and then the shoulders.
Yeah, well, if the butt comes up first, you pretty much didn't get the slack out, did you?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, that, and that's going to shoot you forward. But I love the stripper deadlift where the knees go back really fast, like or the hips go up too soon. Or the stripper deadlift sometimes happens when we cue people to get their knees back fast, right? Because we want the shins to get vertical as the bar starts coming up. You don't want the bar to loop over your knees. You want the bar to slide, up the legs, like past the knees, not over them like a little bump, like a little hump. So
right,
if we say,
just like everything, you're aiming for
exactly,
perpendicular line to the
So you got to get the knees out of the way. So how do you get the knees out of the way? Well, you get them back fast. You push, right? You push the floor. It's like a jump, jump with the bar, right? But if someone pushes their knees back too quickly, they end up with that butt up in the air, and they kind of get that 2-part deadlift, which is the stripper deadlift. We don't want that. But the right idea is there, right? The idea of getting the knees back quickly. But yeah, you want to get the knees back as soon as you can, so the bar has a place to, so the bar can drag up the legs, and stay close to the legs, and you are staying over the bar. The minute you try to get up too soon, right, or the knees decide to come forward once they start going back, now you're looping the bar over the legs. Now you're going to risk possibly losing that deadlift because you're trying to get upright. So now the knees are forward and the bar is on your thighs, and now your poor little back is having to hold on to it.
All of this is like, I feel like that's confusing. Like, I don't really talk to people at all about their knees, what their knees are doing on the way up.
Oh, I have to.
Like, I talk to people about that on the way down.
Yeah,
right. Like, I see knees in the way on the way down a lot more. Like, on the way up, I'm just like, okay, now just drag it up your legs. But that feels like a lot of overthinking on the way up. And I am a queen of overthinking.
I know. Oh, I know. But I think the problem is you see it in the beginning. People pull the bar off the floor. They pick it up off the floor. Well, picking it up means, I'm going to pick it up with my arm, even with straight arms. I think the problem too sometimes is we say big chest, keep the chest up. Well, when we say that, people think they need to lift their chest up, meaning change their back angle. Oh. So you have to emphasize that their back angle doesn't change, right? Nothing changes. You don't show off. You don't stand all the way up until literally the hips finish the movement. So I try to get people to think about that knee extension. So Diego and I do a lot more cueing these days of knees open back, right? Knees open, hips extend. Because if not, we get the looping of the bar over the knees, over the knees, over the knees. Once people understand that it's a push and the knees have to get back soon so that the bar has a place to slide up and not over, then we see a lot better deadlifts. We see a lot more people using their legs and less using their back. So that's something that I didn't cue a lot in the past. I find myself cueing more now. I think oftentimes it's a lot of times of you see people so many times, you see people over and over again, and you start to see different bodies too, and you start to see different thinking of like how they're thinking of the deadlift, and all of a sudden you realize like this is going to make that person better. I need to use that cue now. That's the problem that I'm seeing with that person. It's not that. So the knees back, we do emphasize that, and we emphasize on the way down just basically, I'm blanking on my word.
Reverse what you did on the way up.
Exactly. Yeah. Reverse what you did on the way up.
On the way down, I usually end up, that's where I talk about like the stripper butt or like butt to the back wall, right? Like, so, if I need to talk about knees on the way down, I don't know, maybe I do it the other way around. I cue it on the way down, and then the way up sort of just seems, but I'll say like, wait until you pass the plane of your knees before you bend them. Right. On the way down, it's hips back, hips back, hips back. Now you've passed your knees. Now you can bend them.
Yes. Typically, I'll see people, not all the time, but if they pick the bar up one way, they're going to put it down the same exact way. So if they pick the bar up and the bar loops over their knees, well, of course, on the way down, the bar is going to loop over their knees, right?
It's going to loop over their knees, or it's going to slam into their knees.
Right. Right. If
you're going home with bruised knees, and that was me for a while in the beginning, go home with like purple knees.
Right. I have a client, one of my online clients, trying to get him. He's got a great deadlift. on the way down, he wants to squat the bar down. Many people want to do that. They want to squat the bar down because they're trying to keep their chest up, but they forget that the chest up is really that back, that lats tight, right? They're already tight from the bar coming off the floor. They've gotten tight from the bottom. Now just quickly shove your butt back and get the bar to the floor and let gravity do its job. But they want to gently put the bar down, or they want to lower the bar down to the floor, or they want whatever they're thinking. So I have to kind of, and then when they realize they have, bruised knees, that's not good. Many people will hurt their backs lowering the bar, and I emphasize that with people. Like, you are more likely to hurt your back putting the bar down than picking the bar up. And they go, really? I said, well, can you imagine if I hold my bar like this, if I put my bar down this way, trying to keep the chest up, trying to stay in a more upright position, that puts all the stress on my low back now. Oh, I didn't think about that. I said, if you think about getting your butt back and your hips back, it's on the hamstrings now, hamstrings and glutes. Your back it's not doing anything. So don't try to squat the bar down. Just let gravity get it to the floor and, within control. Don't slam it down to the floor. Don't let it go. We have the hardest time teaching people how to lower the bar rather than picking the bar up. Picking the bar up is easy. It's putting the bar down.
Yeah.
Lots of RDLs. We teach, then I have to go back and teach RDLs to people. Or I grab the dowel and I throw the dowel, do the dowel drill with people.
Yeah.
Hinging.
The dowel drill, if you haven't done that before and you can't see Emily demonstrating it, so you just take like a PVC
try to demonstrate it with her.
Some sort of dowel and line it up along your spine. There's going to be 3 points of contact back at the head. Right. Thoracic spine and the bottom of the tailbone, right? That's like the natural curve to the spine, gives you those 3 points of contact. There's going to be a little bit of a concave bit at the low back, but when you hinge over, when you RDL, right, all those 3 points of contact should remain on the dowel.
Yes.
So the hips go back, but you still have the 3 points of contact. If you are then only in contact with the dowel at the T-spine and the head, then you grounded something.
That's right.
So.
That's right. It's a great drill. We do it quite a bit. We'll do it quite a bit with people who have a difficult time with the hinge. And again, this all comes back to, and this is the squat, the bench, the deadlift, and when we talk about the press, movement patterns.
Yeah.
Right. Really trying to teach people movement patterns, and it's great to learn how to squat and bench and press and deadlift, but there are so many other exercises that I like to teach people because people need to learn how to move better. And I think once they understand how to hinge, how to do a split squat, how to do a goblet squat, they're big lifts. The big lifts get better too, right? I mean, it's all how you move. The better you move, the easier you're going to move, the stronger you're going to get, because you'll be able to add weight to that bar and continually to progress because you have better movement quality. You have good movement patterns. The deadlift, once it gets heavy, if your movement pattern is limited, it's going to be much harder to move that weight because you're like putting it down funny, or you're having a harder time getting into position. So again, like the lighter weights, you can move that weight any way you want without really thinking about it. But once that weight gets heavy enough, those, the movement patterns start to kind of, show their faces. those who can hinge and those who can't. It's kind of remarkable. So that's why it's usually by that point I'm starting to teach somebody, other skills to help them.
Life skills.
Life skills. Yeah. I mean, but hinging is something that people just don't do. It is really interesting. People don't understand.
Yeah, that's funny though, Emily.
The movement from their hips.
I always I hinge more than I squat in the real world.
Of course.
And then the funny thing is, I don't know, like a month or more ago, Sully had an article out about old people hinging to pick things up instead of squatting. I was like, oh my God, that's totally me. I don't want to, it's like you squat with however many hundreds of pounds on your back, but it's like, I'm going to go pick that book up off the floor. I'm going to hinge to pick it up rather than bend my knees. And his whole point was right. Like, do the squat in real life too. I hinge in real life all the time. I do the opposite of what you just said. Yeah.
No, I hinge. I mean, why? I mean, the deadlift is the primary lift with many of my older clients.
Well, it's
The
because
squat
old
is
people's knees hurt, Emily. My
yes,
knees
and
hurt.
the squat. If you can squat, you can get yourself off the toilet. Fine, that's great. That's all you need to be able to do to squat. You know,
Well,
if you can
and
get
maybe a low beach chair.
a low beach chair and a couch. But the deadlift is that we do that all the time. We pick stuff up off the floor all the time. Older people like to garden. All my clients, they all talk about gardening and raking leaves and, you know, carrying mulch. So teaching them, I taught someone how to pick up a mulch bag by picking up a sandbag
Yeah.
the other day. That's a deadlift.
Yeah. I was busy moving feed bags yesterday.
That's a deadlift. Now the squat, she can get down to a squat like to weed. That's great. That's mobility, right? She can squat. That's great. And she's got the leg strength to get back up. But the deadlift, we do that in our daily life constantly.
Well, I had this thing up on my Facebook page like years ago, which was, I forget where it even came from, but it was like 2 images side by side. And one was a person set up to deadlift. And the other one was, and it was probably, to be honest, like maybe more of like a trap bar deadlift setup. But the other picture was a person picking up 2 handled grocery bags off the ground on either side.
Yeah.
Right, but it was like the same movement, right?
Farmer's carries.
Set up the same way. So yeah, people deadlift and squat in the real world more than they realize they do. Yeah. You do it with a bar and then all of a sudden.
Yeah, but I don't squat to load the dishwasher. I don't squat to load the dishwasher. I hinge to load the dishwasher. I hinge to throw something in the trash can. I hinge to pick something off the floor. Right? So when people bend over, they're not bending over. They're not using their hips. They're using their back. And that's why people hurt their backs, because they decide to round their back to pick something up. There is no joint in your trunk, right? I always tell people, you have a belly button here in your spine. Your spine flexes and extends. It's not a joint though. So you can round your back and extend it when there's no weight in your hand, like doing cat-cow yoga. It's the only time flexion is good. Flexion is good. However, I should say this. Flexion is okay if you're picking up a sandbag or a stone and you keep it in position, right? This is true. You have to round your back in order to pick those weird objects up. It's the extending it when you're in motion that is bad. We don't want to round and then all of a sudden change our position. Keep the position. If you stay in that same position, your back will stay safe. But the problem is people round and then they pick something up and they automatically extend and then they throw my back out. Well, yeah, you stupid. You threw your back out because you picked that thing up with like a turtle, and you don't understand how to control your back well, right? So that's the issue with the bending over. If you learn to use your hips and use the lever there, you're in better shape, especially if you've been squatting and deadlifting. You've got a strong thighs, strong glutes, strong hamstrings. You don't have to use anything else. So the deadlift is the primary, exercise. It's the one that's the heaviest too for all my clients. No one is squatting heavier than they're deadlifting. Nobody. No, not one. Not one. Because I emphasize that with them. That is their main lift. The squat is kind of secondary. If they can squat, great, but they do it once a week, twice a week. It's the deadlift is the main one, because that is what we do primarily in real life. So we've talked about obviously dragging the bar off the legs. We talked about lowering the bar. Yeah. Rebecca was mentioning that. Keeping the bar on the legs as you're lowering it, right? You just basically want to reverse what you did.
Well, same thing either way, up or down. If it's off your legs, right, you've got that moment arm, and it's more, I don't know, I guess more strain on your back.
Right. Absolutely.
More likely to be problematic.
Yeah, you don't want the bar to get away from you. You want to keep that bar on your legs. So you keep the bar on your legs.
You won't be able to.
Yeah. Right. By keeping the lats engaged and by getting that bar down quickly. Let it slide down the legs. Let's shove the butt back and let it drop.
Don't baby it on the way down. But don't lose control of it either.
Exactly.
There's the sweet spot in the middle.
It's like somehow you and I somehow coach together or learn together. It's
so one of the things that you talk about or that we've talked about with all of these lifts is the idea that each rep is a single. Yes. And so with deadlift, like that one is kind of, I think, notorious for what happens when you don't treat each rep as a single. So do you want to talk about that a little bit? Like what tends to happen maybe in like a CrossFit gym or maybe a commercial gym, what people are doing one rep to the next in their deadlift, and how that differs from the way we teach it.
Yeah. And that's, you know, and I know that there are other professionals who will coach the bounce. So Rebecca's talking about bouncing the bar off the floor, like not stopping at the floor to reset again, to pull for the next rep if you're doing multiple reps. Many people, like at a CrossFit gym, because they're doing it for time and they're doing it for speed, will bounce. So they'll drop the bar off the floor and they'll use the momentum, that bounce, to like allow them to get that weight back up, you know, again. We don't like to teach that. I don't teach bouncing the bar. Some coaches will coach their lifters to do a drill of bouncing. I come from the school of ballet and technique and precision, and for me, bouncing just kind of loosens you up. It's not very what's the word I'm looking for? It's not very clean.
Precise.
It's not precise. Yeah, it doesn't emphasize what we're trying to emphasize with people, which is, you know, setting up and staying tight and treating every single rep as though they were a single, so that they all get the same setup. They all get the same emphasis, so that you have a clean, you know, ride, and you can practice. You're practicing every single rep, right? You want every single rep to look the same, to be the same, ideally.
Well, and I think also, like when we were talking before about step 4 and you squeeze the slack out, and how much work is happening when you've got, you know, all the slack out, and, you know, you've got your 250 bar, but you've got 240 pounds of that in your hands when you're getting the slack out. Like you're depriving yourself of that work, of that opportunity to get strong at the bottom. Your lats aren't getting as much work out of it. Your back isn't maybe getting as strong as it could otherwise.
Exactly.
Plus, I think it depends on the flooring, but like my basement, like where I've been deadlifting recently, I don't know what is up with my stall mats down there, because they have totally got divots in them now from deadlifting. And so the bar just like sinks or rolls to a certain spot. And I can't even imagine trying to deadlift a bounce off of certain surfaces where the bar ends up, just because of the ground, like rolling to one place or another.
Yeah. I could never, I don't know, me personally, I couldn't balance my deadlifts. I'm just so ingrained in stopping. And I stop for a split second. I don't futz around at the bottom of the deadlift, right? Some people kind of get down there and they breathe and I'm like, oh my God, I'm already dead. I'm done. I've already done 3 more reps after, you know, by the time you decide to do your second one. That's just me. I will lose tension very quickly. So for me, staying tight means putting the bar down, taking a quick breath, and going again, right? And bouncing the bar. When I see people bounce the bar, the back starts to go. I feel like it's reverberating through me. Like I don't want to feel that reverberation. You know, that would throw me off. We definitely don't allow bouncing when we do our contests. When we do any, a deadlift at one of our strongman contests, you start bouncing that bar, I'm going to be like, no rep, no rep, no rep. I am notorious for no repping. And it's usually the CrossFitters who, you know, I have to no rep.
You tell them that rule beforehand, though, yeah?
I totally do, but I still call them on it.
Well, yeah, but it's old habits die hard, so.
But I don't want to see a bounce. I think, you know, you spend too much time drilling someone and helping them, and you're teaching someone how to move, right? You're teaching someone how to get stronger. So that's part of the process. Part of the process is staying in position and making sure that you are replicating every single rep from like you did from the very first. You didn't bounce the bar off the floor in the first the first rep. Why would you do it for the rest of them?
Yeah, plus, right. Deadlift, not bounce lift.
It's a deadlift. It's a deadlift, right? It's a deadlift. So does that means you have to maybe take some weight off the bar, or, you know, do triples? I don't care. You know, I always tell people quality over quantity. You know, I will take three good triples, 3 triples than a sucky set of 5, because you just can't maintain your position. Maybe it's, you know, the weight's moving fine. You're just gassed. maybe some conditioning needs to come in, maybe something else has to happen with your program. I don't know what it is, but we're not going to start to bounce the bar because you need to get all 5 reps, off the floor. So I think we talked about lowering the bar.
I think the only other thing that I was just reminded of when you were saying that I would mention is breathing with the deadlift. And the way I always cue people is in step 4. Get your big breath and hold it, then squeeze your chest through, or get your lats tight. Because when I have people do step 4, right? Like sometimes when you're all squished up in that position, you go to get a big breath. What ends up happening for a lot of people is they'll breathe up into their shoulders. They'll lose whatever they just set up by getting their chest squeezed through or their lats tight. So I always say, big breath, hold it, tight lats, drag it up your legs.
Yeah. I think I find myself, and I think I sometimes have to demonstrate it. And when they say, well, how do you take your breath? I can see myself, I grab the bar, I bring my shins to the bar, and then I take the breath as I'm squeezing everything up. So I kind of squeeze the slack out of the bar.
You're doing it simultaneously.
Exactly. Yeah. So I'll just kind of, and I don't necessarily take a really big breath like I do when I squat because I'm folded over. Again, the tension for me is that slack out. If I get that slack out, that my breath kind of goes, it goes right with me. It just kind of happens right away. Belts. Before we end the deadlift, we've talked about belts before, and we talked about, I think, in the gear episode, that belts are very individual for people when it comes to the deadlift. So keep that in mind if you're deadlifting. Some people don't like to wear their belt when they deadlift. Others do. They find it's a little bit more. They can when they take their breath, they kind of feel that breath throughout their belly, throughout their back. It's very individual. It's practice. So if you want to use the belt, you need to practice with it. I always say try to wear your belt a little looser, maybe on the deadlift than you do on the squat. I myself can get the belt to a tight position, but I don't do well the deadlift when it's in the tightest hole. So I'll open it up another hole, I'll loosen it up just a bit. It's still fairly tight, much better for me. So tighter is not necessarily always better.
But not, and with people who are just getting started out and are new to this, a lot of times looser. Yeah. They'll put it on deadlift loose enough that it'll slide up their back.
And that does nothing.
Into that step 3 position. So if it's loose enough that it's moving, then that's too loose.
No, when you put the belt on, you should put it on and realize like you want this belt off as soon as possible. Yeah. Right. But it shouldn't be on where you want it off as soon as possible. And when you get in position, you can't breathe. Like I find if it's too tight for me, I'm bringing up my lunch. I'm bringing up whatever I ate. So I have to kind of sometimes humble myself and be like, well, I know I can get into that hole, but I better wear it on this hole if I want to be able to deadlift well. And you never want to use the belt as a Band-Aid. So if you're having a day where the back doesn't feel so great, don't try to push it by wearing the belt. Make that day a day to do more medicinal deadlift work. Keep the deadlift light. Keep the reps low. Keep the volume low, and just work through that position. That's always I've made that mistake in the past, and I'll never make that mistake again. I think that wraps it up for me. Anything else you want to add to the deadlift? Those are like the biggest cues that I really try to give people. I'm sure there are plenty more. But
the only other thing, and I'm back to breath again, Emily.
Sure.
But I have a lot of people who exhale at the top, or want to exhale at the top, or that I will catch initially exhaling as they're putting the bar down, right? And this gets back to the Valsalva and the purpose of doing that. But with the deadlift, I do sometimes find that there are people that are more inclined to get dizzy or something like that. And if it's an individual like that who, for dizziness reasons, somehow needs to take a breath at the top. I don't know the physiology behind all of that, but if they get a little more air at the top, get tight, and then lower it.
Yes.
I don't have a problem with that so much. I don't like it when people are trying to exhale on the way down. And if a person doesn't need to breathe at the top, they shouldn't. Right. But for a lot of people, especially say if they haven't had enough liquid that day, if it's early in the morning, if their eating is a little off, if they stayed out too late partying the night before, something like that. The deadlift, just because you're going from that low position to a tall position and then back that change in altitude, I guess, for some people, is likely to make some people dizzy.
Yeah, I think I've seen it plenty of times.
I don't ever get dizzy, but I see spots sometimes.
I see spots. Sometimes I don't get dizzy.
It's snowing in here and it's not chalk dust.
I see people when they've come. Typically, it's people who have started a diet, or haven't eaten just because they didn't think they needed to,
or they're experimenting with a low carb diet. Yeah.
And they have to sit down, and they have to sit down, or they have passed out doing the deadlift.
Oh, right? Yeah. I haven't ever seen that in person. I've got on video all the time.
No, we have had that. We've had that. I think if people start to get dizzy, if that's not the case, that's because they're looking up. They're looking up and down too much. So I'll remind people, put your eye gaze on a fixed point and keep your eyes there. If you start taking your eyes off of that and looking around, you're going to get, you could start to get dizzy. And when they do that, it's much better. They kind of focus on something and they're not dizzy anymore. As a dancer, you practice turning and you practice with like spot by spotting. You watch something and then you kind of slowly rotate around and you whip your head back around because you're doing multiple turns. Like imagine a dancer doing fouette turns. So fouette turns are you extend your leg in front, whip it to the side, pull it in, right? Those who have seen Swan Lake.
Okay, or just me last weekend on the flying squirrel.
There you go.
You know what I mean?
They're doing
up in the air by the tree.
The reason she doesn't get dizzy doing fouettes, the 32 fouettes, is because she's spotting. She's learned to spot. She sees a point, and when she whips her head around, she looks at the same spot. Dancers don't look around when they're doing pirouettes. They would get dizzy and they'd fall down. So they look at the same spot. So you look at the same spot while you're deadlifting. Yes. Yet that won't help you you shouldn't get dizzy. And yes, I agree. I try to encourage people to keep their breath at the top. If they do let it out, not a big deal. Take your breath first, then lower the bar down. You just never want to lower the bar down without any air in you, especially as it gets heavier. Just you always want to be mindful of what you're doing with your body while you're moving your body with heavier weights. But yeah, if someone's having an issue, then let the breath get let out as long as they get that breath in for the next one. That's a good call. I forgot about that. The breathing. There's something else I was thinking about while you were talking.
Well, but you mentioned eye gaze, which is the other thing that we haven't actually talked about much. But you just covered it, yeah.
Yeah, eye gaze. Eye gaze is going to be a little further out than with your squat. Squat's going to be, you're looking down at the floor. Deadlifts, you're looking down, but you're definitely looking out a little bit more. I usually tell people look at the bottom of a bench, or like a sandbag of sitting on the floor. So where people are, a sandbag's a good enough of an eye gaze. You don't want your head cranked up. You don't want your chin up and your neck kind of, all cranked up and your chin protruding because that's just going to cause irritation in your neck. And also will probably pull your chest forward and make you, raise your chest before anything else. So eye gaze definitely plays a role. I don't spend too much time on that in the beginning with somebody if they're learning how to deadlift. There are other things to fix. Eventually, we will discuss. Okay, bring your chin down. You can look up with your eyes without using your chin. Squeezing your chest up doesn't mean you need to lift your head, type of thing.
Yeah, but a lot of times you get people who will do that because they're not familiar enough with moving their T-spine, but they can move their neck around. So I'm sure there are many other things, other points I can't think of. But there's and grippy toes, but
there's so much. There's shoes, and then there's no shoes. And if you're wearing your shoes, you want to make sure that you're not forward on your toes. You want to make sure you're in the middle of the foot. But even if you're barefoot, you still could be on your toes. So that's a step. We don't. That's usually the step like 4. Step A, step B, in step 4. Get off your toes. So make sure you're not forward on your toes, but off your toes.
And the thing with that, sorry, because I know we're running late, but like that thing about getting off your toes, if somebody in step 4 has squeezed their chest through and still feels like their toes are gripping the ground, that squeezing the chest through hasn't gotten them to midfoot. The way you get back to midfoot is through the ankle. Because a lot of times what will happen is people will rock back, but they'll do it with their hips. So they've just lowered their hips. So it's a rocking back into the heels from the ankle, not from the hip.
Yeah, it's like a statue. It's like you move yourself, but you don't change it. It's interesting how many, I mean, as I'm talking to you and thinking about this, how many cues I don't use anymore. You know,
well, once
like I used to use that one all the time.
How it feels, you don't need to say rock back. No, not from your hip, from your ankle, right?
Yeah,
it's
pretty awesome. That's like a lot of. I mean, and this comes from just cueing it better from the beginning, coaching it better from the beginning, people picking things up faster, but a lot of and not using as many cues as I used to before because people are already in that position. So now I'm discovering other cues, other things, especially about the knees. That's been a big one, you know, and that's just because I can't even think, but I am thinking about how I used to coach the deadlift like just 3-4 years ago and how I coach it now. It's not that different, but I definitely don't say some of the things I used to say because I don't need to, which is good, which means I probably am doing a better job of getting the person, you know, into position sooner. And there are there are tons of videos out there, and people are constantly watching videos. So they kind of come in sometimes with an idea of, you know, of the deadlift already. But as I said in the beginning, always a good idea. If you're going to watch a video, please make sure you're watching somebody who looks like you. If you're 5'11", find someone relatively 5'11". If they've got a long torso and short femurs, find someone who looks like that. If they've got long femurs and a short torso, short arms, long arms, just try to find somebody who looks like you because your position is pretty much going to be similar to that person's position. So it's always a good idea to watch somebody who vaguely resembles you. We're going to wrap that up here, guys. If you have any questions about what we've talked about with the deadlift or if the bench or the squat, please always try to reach out to us. We'd love to hear from you. We like talking about this, as you can tell. It's good for Rebecca and I to share what we've been doing with our clients and just almost think out loud about some things that we've been doing and, oh, you do that? Oh, I don't do that. I do that too. So it's always nice to hear what other coaches do. And it's always good to hear from other lifters as to what might work for you. And hopefully some of the cues that we've talked about today, you might be able to use. All right. Thanks everybody. Have a great week and we'll be back soon. Thanks, Rebecca.
Take care.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to 5x3 Radio with Emily and Rebecca. If you like our show and want to know more about 5x3 training, please visit us at www.5, that's F-I-V-E, the letter X, the number 3.com. You can also find us on Facebook and Instagram. To learn more about Rebecca, please visit her website, cornerstonestrengthmaryland.com. Thanks for listening and have a great week.